The story of Joseph in Genesis 37 is a deeply emotional account filled with lessons about suffering, overcoming challenges, and God's sovereignty. As we analyze this chapter, we witness the beginning of a journey that, despite being fraught with difficulties, reveals God's plan unfolding in Joseph's life. Joseph was Jacob's favorite son, and this created a complicated family dynamic. Jacob openly showed his affection for Joseph, especially by giving him the multicolored coat, a symbol of distinction and favoritism. This gesture provoked envy among his brothers, who felt overlooked. Additionally, Joseph's dreams, in which he saw himself in a position of prominence over his brothers and even his parents, further intensified their resentment. This jealousy and hatred culminated in a plan to get rid of Joseph. At first, the brothers considered killing him, but thanks to the intervention of Reuben and Judah, they decided to sell him as a slave. Joseph, who had been the beloved and protected son, suddenly found himself betrayed by his own family, thrown into an empty pit, and sold like a commodity. This moment can be seen as Joseph's lowest point, both literally, when he was thrown into the pit, and emotionally, as he realized the betrayal of his own brothers. He was torn from everything he knew and, unexpectedly, saw his life fall apart. Here comes the first important lesson. Even in the darkest and most painful moments, God is working. Joseph was thrown into an empty pit, a dry, dark, and deep well. This detail is symbolic. He was at the bottom, without water, without apparent hope, abandoned by his brothers, the ones who should have protected him. This represents the emotional rock bottom that many of us experience at some point in our lives. Joseph's pit reflects the feelings of despair, loneliness, and betrayal. But it is precisely in this rock-bottom place that divine action begins to reveal itself. Even when we are at our lowest, God is planning something greater for us. The fact that the brothers decided to sell him instead of killing him was already divine intervention. Reuben and Judah were instruments to preserve Joseph's life, even if imperfectly. What seemed to be the end of his life was actually the beginning of a new chapter, which would lead him to the purpose that God had planned. After being sold, Joseph was taken to Egypt, where he was purchased by Potiphar, an official of Pharaoh. Here we begin to see God's sovereignty. Joseph was being taken to a foreign land, where he would be shaped and prepared for something far greater than he could imagine. It is interesting to note how God uses situations of suffering, which in our eyes seem like defeats, to place us where he wants us to be. If we look at the bigger picture, we understand that Joseph's suffering was part of God's plan to save not only his family, but an entire nation during the famine that would come years later. God was in control from the start. Even in the pit, even in being sold as a slave, God's purpose was always active in Joseph's life. The path to the fulfillment of Joseph's dreams paradoxically passed through suffering. The pit was just the beginning of Joseph's journey. Over time, he would face more challenges, such as the false accusation from Potiphar's wife and imprisonment. But in every situation, God was with him, giving him wisdom and grace to overcome. God not only lifted him from the physical pit, but also raised him from the emotional pit, strengthening his faith and character. What seemed to be the end of his story was actually the turning point. Joseph was sold as a slave, but God would exalt him to the second highest position in Egypt, just below Pharaoh. Here is the great lesson. No matter how deep the pit you find yourself in, God has the power to lift you up and place you in places you never imagined. The same God who allowed Joseph to suffer was the one who exalted him. Joseph's story teaches us that, even amid betrayal, injustice, and moments of despair, God never loses control. He allows us to go through difficult times to prepare us, shape us, and accomplish something greater than we can see. Joseph, at the bottom of the pit, did not know that he was on his way to governing Egypt and saving his family. Likewise, we often don't understand the processes we go through, but we can trust that God has a perfect plan. In Genesis 50:20, Joseph later said to his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. God specializes in turning evil into good, in lifting us from the pit and leading us to the purpose He has for us. Just as Joseph, perhaps today you find yourself at the bottom of a pit, feeling betrayed, abandoned, or forgotten. But remember, the pit is not the end. God has something greater for you, and just as He did with Joseph, He can lift you up and lead you to the purpose He has designed. You just need to trust and remain faithful even in the difficulties. And here is the important connection with our lives today. Although God is sovereign and in control of all situations, there is a part that we must do to get out of the pit and move forward. Joseph, despite the adversities, found environments that provided him with growth and learning throughout his journey. In the same way, we need to place ourselves in environments that foster our healing, spiritual and emotional progress, and our ability to overcome difficulties. To get out of the pit, it is essential to surround yourself with the right environments. Joseph, throughout his journey, encountered people and places that were essential for his growth and the fulfillment of God's purpose in his life. Likewise, you will also need to seek out these ideal environments for your transformation. Here are 7 environments that can help propel your life out of the pit, based on Joseph's story and the lessons we can draw from his journey. First, live with people who release words of blessing over your life. Joseph faced negative and judgmental words from his brothers, but God always spoke words of hope over him. Similarly, you need to be surrounded by those who declare blessings and life over you. Second, be in environments with people who think positively. Joseph maintained his faith even in the most difficult moments. Positivity is a force that transforms environments, generating hope and a vision for the future. Third, run to environments where people do not judge you. At the bottom of the pit, the last thing you need is judgment. Just as Joseph was judged by his brothers, you should avoid critical environments and seek places of acceptance where you can recover in peace. Fourth, be with people who love you. At the bottom of the pit, emotional isolation can be fatal. Joseph found support and affection even in foreign lands, and you should also seek environments where love and support are constant. Fifth, seek an environment of teaching. Joseph, even in prison, took the opportunity to learn and grow. You should place yourself in a learning environment where you can develop the mindset of a student, always open to new lessons. Sixth, look for an environment with people who have gone through what you are going through. Just as Joseph learned from the challenges of others, you can also find strength and wisdom in environments with people who share similar experiences. This generates empathy and mutual support. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, do not distance yourself from Jesus. The church is the ideal place to reconnect with faith and hope. Just as God was with Joseph in every moment of his journey, Jesus is by your side in your most difficult times. The church, a place without judgment, is the environment where you can find spiritual restoration and renewal. Just as Joseph, you may be going through difficult moments, feeling abandoned and betrayed. But remember, the pit is not the end of your story. God has greater plans, but you need to be in the right environments for those plans to flourish. May you, like Joseph, find the way out of the pit and experience the purpose that God has for your life.